Welcome to the new edition of the ABBA League magazine. We've reached the final stage of the competition, and the teams who got there are of course Crvena Zvezda and the last year's runner-up Cedevita, with both teams aiming for the first piece of silverware in the ABBA League in their histories. The first two games were of course played in Belgrade, as the red and white were worthy winners of the regular season and were determined to win both times in front of their crowd. In the coming minutes, we'll of course show you whether they managed to do so, and at the end of the show, we'll present you with our choice of the best 5 actions of the first 2 games. But we start with the news first. Vladimir Dasic is not a Budućnost player anymore, as both parties agreed on that being the best course of action. The 26-year-old power forward has had a solid contribution of 8 odd points and 5 rebounds in the 21.5 minutes he spent playing on average for the Montenegrin champion. And now we go to the first game between Crvena Zvezda and Cedevita in Belgrade, and after a few opening exchanges in the first game, Crvena Zvezda was very quick to stamp their authority in the first quarter, as Luka Mitrovic also announced his good shooting performance with a 3 in his first attempt. Well, Zvezda's captain was the main force behind Crvena Zvezda taking an early 7-point lead, although Cedevita did quickly close to get the 3 points after Barac was successful. Didn't last long though, as the home team was soon 8 points to the good again when Kalinic rebounded well in offense. After Mitrovic assisted Marjanovic well, the latter scored and drew a foul as well to give the red and white their first double-digit lead of the game. And they didn't stop there either, as a bit later Charles Jenkins rounded up a 13-0 run for the hosts, after which they were leading by as much as 24-8. And it was 24-9 after the first 10 minutes. When Mike Cirbes opened up his scoring evening, Crvena Zvezda was ahead by an amazing 17 points, and that grew to 19 as Marko Tej drove to the basket well. It seemed Crvena Zvezda's domination would just go on and on as Dangubic stole the ball from the confused visitors and dunked to open up a 21-point lead. The same player then scored from distance, and the result was already 32-9 before Cedevita finally managed to score in the second quarter, that after almost 4 fruitless minutes when Luka Babic was precise from distance. Boban Marjanovic was still king of the racket and was able to equal the home team's highest advantage of 23 points before the visitors began to show some signs of resurgence, scoring 7 unanswered points as Miro Bilan managed to close the gap to 16. The first half ended with Zvezda in front by 42-24 as Boban Marjanovic scored his 13th point already. After the interval, Luka Babic was quick to score for 3. But Luka Mitrovic managed to respond immediately, and Crvena Zvezda was again in front by 20. In that time, Luka Babic was the player who kept Cedevita in it, as he was still scoring from distance and the visitors had cut the deficit to 15 points. The big difference in the second half was Cedevita's defense, as they were pressing hard all over the court, and after another stolen ball, Nemanja Gordic was able to close the gap to just 11. It obviously caught the home team by surprise, as they hadn't responded well to the visiting team's pressure, and little by little Cedevita crept back into the match, as they were only trailing the hosts by 5 points after Bilan and Žganec had rounded up a 15-0 run for them. After 7 long minutes without a single point, Jakub Blažić then finally broke the deadlock for the hosts, as he made it 49-42. Mike Cirbes joined the Slovenian and was able to score 5 successive points towards the end of the third period, after which Crvena Zvezda had recaptured a 10-point lead. It wasn't long before the red and white boasted a 15-point lead again when Lazic was successful from distance. But Cedevita had sensed their chance in the third period and wasn't going to go down without trying, and when Ukic scored for 3, he had cut the deficit to 10. A bit after that, Mario Delaš scored over Marko Tej to further close the gap to 8 points. But with less than 3 minutes remaining on the clock, Jaka Blažić managed to score an all-important 3 to make it 65-55. Still, Cedevita was trying hard and managed to close the gap to 6 points with 60 seconds to go. But it was a little too late when Jenkins put Zvezda back to a 7-point lead with only 38 seconds remaining. The game was well and truly over, and it ended with 68-59, of course, for Crvena Zvezda. Well, there isn't much to say, as we simply didn't perform as we should in the first half. We knew it was going to be tough, as they're an aggressive team and we should be able to match them in these sort of games. I think in the second half we showed just how we should play throughout the series, and that's what we must do tomorrow. I think Crvena Zvezda deservedly won the game, in which they were the better opponent in every aspect of the game. I'd like to join Luka Babic in saying it made little sense that the team that had 2 days less for resting was the more aggressive team in the second half. We just didn't start the game the way we should have done. We just weren't concentrated enough, as we let them to do what they wanted on both sides of the court. Our defense was leaking on all sides, as they were free to drive through and pass the ball around. We should have passed it much better ourselves in offense, but on numerous occasions we elected to dribble instead, which wasn't a problem for their well-organized defense. The good thing was we have shown real character in the second half as we tried to get back in it. But again, Crvena Zvezda was the better opponent in every aspect of the game, and their win is well deserved.
Mislim da je u puno tih stvari Zvezda večera zaista bila bolja i još jednom ponavljam, zasluženo dobila prvi meč.
I think we started the way we wanted to and were able to open up a big lead, but then we fell drastically in the third period, and that is something we must avoid in the next games. I'd like to congratulate Cedevita on their fighting display, and we can't wait for the next game. We opened the game very well indeed, and the big gap we created wasn't what we expected, as Cedevita is a quality opponent. We were very good in offense, as we were able to pass our ideas well while staying firm in defense. But we knew Cedevita wouldn't play the second half as badly, and sure enough, that is exactly what happened. They lifted their defensive display and were not allowing us to play the way we wanted, and we were making far too many mistakes, and in the end we can be very pleased we won in a game in which we made as many as 18 turnovers. Cedevita was able to make us pay for that, predominantly by shooting well from distance, and made us realize the series will be very difficult indeed.
nas čeka teška serija I velike neizvjesnosti. Mi smo slavili.
In the end, we've won, but I'm also concerned about Mike Cirbes and his knee injury. I can't say for sure he'll be able to play tomorrow, and Stefan Jovic was also not feeling well, which was evident in the minutes he spent playing. We were also not reacting well to their zonal pressure, so tomorrow I expect an even harder encounter and for Cedevita to raise their game.
Odreagovali na taj zonski presik sa dosta grešaka. Vidjet ćemo kako će situacija biti sutra, očekujem još teži meč, svakako Cedevita će sigurno uraditi one stvari ponovo koje radile ove čas da bi bila dobra.
We have to respond well to the situation in which we have lost a player in rotation, and that was also evident today.
Kompletni sutra jako bi nam puno značilo jer se osjetilo u pojedinim trenucima da nam hvali igrač u rotaciji.
And as it turned out, Crvena Zvezda was forced to play without the injured Mike Cirbes in the second game of the final, but was again able to open the match really well indeed. After a few opening exchanges in which Cedevita took the early lead when Nemanja Gordic scored from distance. But as it turned out, this was the only lead Cedevita will have in this game, as the home team then managed to score 7 in a row, and Boban Marjanovic was again proving to be too hard to handle, and soon Crvena Zvezda had an 8-point advantage. Then Carlos Ganec reduced the deficit to 6 points. But that was followed by a run of 6 unanswered points, after which they already had a double-digit lead when Luka Mitrovic scored for 3. The first quarter ended with Crvena Zvezda in front by 22-8. The visitors opened the second period better when Tomislav Zupčić scored from distance, but Zvezda's response was swift, and by the time Jenkins scored, the red and white were in front by 16. When Fran Pilepic started scoring for Cedevita, the gap was back to 11 points, and then 9 when Rokoleni Ukic was successful. The last 4 Zvezda's points in the first half was scored by Boban Marjanovic, who also set the result after the first 20 minutes when he made it 40-32 and had by that time already had 14 points and 10 rebounds to his name. After the interval, Miro Bilan scored to cut the deficit to 7 points, but that was followed by 5 successive points from the home team. Soon after that, Crvena Zvezda equaled their highest lead of the match of 16 points when Boban Marjanovic made it 52-36. And then the lead grew to 18 points for the first time when Luka Mitrovic rounded up a 13-2 partial for them. After that, Stanko Barac unexpectedly scored twice for 3. And soon Cedevita was only trailing the hosts by 12 points. And then by 10 come the end of the third period when Ramljak made a good collective action count. Very soon after entering the decisive 10 minutes of the game, Cedevita was able to close the gap to just 5 points after Ukic managed to score from open play for the first time in it. Talking about 2-point shooting, of course. And it took Crvena Zvezda 3 minutes to score their first points of the last quarter when Jaka Blažić broke the deadlock. But it was Cedevita with more energy to their game, and it wasn't long before they were only trailing the hosts by 2 points when Zupčić rounded up an 11-3 partial for them. Crvena Zvezda managed to respond as Marjanovic made it +6 for them with 2.5 minutes remaining on the clock. 41 seconds before time, Luka Babic managed to score from a difficult position to again close the gap to just 3 points. After which, Nikola Kalinic missed his shot for 3, but was able to make an offensive rebound and put his team 5 points to the good. Cedevita was still trying as Babic hit for 3, but in the end the time ran out for them, and when Charles Jenkins scored from the free throw line with just 1.4 seconds remaining, it was clear Crvena Zvezda had won their second home game and goes to Zagreb with a 2-win margin. 69-65 was also the end result of the second game of the finals in Belgrade. I won't say it was a similar game to the first one. We were better today, but the game came up short by a step or two. I don't think the series is all but decided, as we believe we can have longer periods of playing well and try not to black out as we have in both games. So it could be a different story in Zagreb, as we will do everything in our power to be positive in the next game.
Da će ipak u Zagrebu biti drugačija priča. Vjerujemo da možemo ponovno ući u seriju na pozitivan način i učinit ćemo sve da to bude tako sljedeću utakmicu.
Ništa, ja bih čestitao Zvezdi na pobjedu i sigurno da je...
I'd like to congratulate Crvena Zvezda for their second win. And of course, they have a big advantage now, but we were in a similar situation not so long ago. Of course, Crvena Zvezda is a better team than Budućnost, and to come back from this will be much more difficult. That said, as long as we're in it, we have a chance. I believe we have a team which is psychologically strong enough to pull this off, and much will be known after the next game in Zagreb.
Sve ćemo vidjeti već u prvoj sljedećoj utakmici koja se igra u srijedu u Zagrebu. Otprilike slična utakmica kao juče.
The game itself was similar to the one from yesterday, as we have allowed them to pull away in the first quarter, and then it is hard to catch up with the home team. We managed to come back in the second period, but then made similar mistakes in the third one. Still, we were able to get close towards the end, but haven't had enough concentration to see it through.
Kroz dva nezagrađivanja, nekvalitetno odrađene obrane do kraja, dopustili Zvezdi ipak da rekao bi ipak zasluženo dobije. Mislim da su to ekipe koje su...
I believe these two teams have shown best basketball throughout the season. True, we did have more oscillations throughout the season, as we also played in the EuroLeague with our young and inexperienced team. Playing on two difficult fronts is always tough, and that's the reason we might have lost on more occasions than we would have wished for. But I think these two teams deserve to be in the final. For now, everything is going according to expectations, especially regarding the behavior of both teams, and I have no complaints on how things are unfolding, and I hope it will stay that way all the way through. Oh, it is now 2-0 for us, and we managed to do our business on home turf. We played well apart from the second period. Our defensive display was good, and in offense we tried to include Boban Marjanovic as much as we could. It's a nice feeling, but now we go to Zagreb, where we'll try to win the title for the first time in our history. Well, Cedevita has shown their value in both games in front of our fans, but we managed to beat them both times and now have a nice advantage before the first match in Zagreb.
Mi smo uspjeli da slavimo u seriji i povedemo sa 2-0, odbranimo domaći teren. Serija ide u Zagreb, oni su pokazali da
They have proved they can get out of trouble, as they have in the semi-final matchup against Budućnost.
Način igranja napred takav da su u toj seriji protiv Budućnosti na jako kvalitetan način u ta 3 meča izgledali, posebno u tom prvom nakon serije gdje su velikom razlikom savladali odličnu Budućnost. Znamo da nas očekuje čvrsta igra.
We know we are in for a difficult game against a very motivated opponent, as we both aim for our first title. We know we'll have to be concentrated for the whole 40 minutes, as they're a quality and an athletic team. We must stay aggressive and try to do our best.
ritmu, na čvrstinu moramo da odgovorimo čvrstom igrom i da odigramo što je bolje moguće taj prvi meč.
It was a tough game for us. We started well and continued to do so in the second period, but have then dropped in the third as they pressed us zonally, for which we didn't have the answer to. It was tight in the end, but we managed to win, and that is the most important thing. A very important win for us. We learned against Partizan that it's difficult after losing a game in the playoff in front of our fans, but we managed to get through, and that proved that we can carry this burden. We go to Zagreb to try and close the series in the first attempt. For sure, it's difficult now. We are behind by 2-0. We've shown we can come back after falling behind, but now we face a different game in Zagreb. We'll give our maximum to try and return the series to Belgrade. I think Crvena Zvezda is a deserved winner, as they were in front for the whole time. We need to concentrate and forget about these first two games and win the next one on Wednesday, and then we'll see what's next. So Crvena Zvezda wins both games in Belgrade and has now taken a commanding 2-0 lead in the series, which means they only need to win one more time for their first title. That said, it still isn't over in spite of their big advantage. The best player of the first two encounters is of course Boban Marjanovic. In the first match he reached the index of 24 as he scored 15 points and had 12 rebounds, while in the other game he was able to reach a playing index of 39. Due to Mike Tirves' injury, he was forced to play almost the entire game as he recorded 20 points, 14 rebounds and 5 assists. And now let's see which are the best 5 actions of these first two games of the final. Number 5, it is the zonal pressure we were talking about before, as the Cedevita managed to steal the ball and get it through to Nemanja Gordic. Number 4, again a good collective counter-attack from Cedevita, and Ukic's pass was then concluded by Luka Babic with a dunk, of course. Number 3, again the collective action from Cedevita, again closed up by a dunk. This time it was Ivan Ramljak. At number 2, now we have the action from Crvena Zvezda, and Marko Tej was making his presence count in the record as he closed this collective action with a dunk. This is our number 2. And at number 1, it is this great defense from Nemanja Tangubic, who stole the ball from Luka Babic and then, of course, dunked it in the end from the counter-attack. This, in our choice, is the best action of the first two games of the final. So the series now moves to Zagreb, and the first game is scheduled on 8:30 on Wednesday evening. If Cedevita succeeds in winning the third game, the fourth will be played on Thursday, while the eventual fifth then on the 2nd of May in Belgrade. And that's all for today. Thank you for joining us. Do so again next time. Until then, it's bye-bye.